So good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar, Maximizing the Local Supply Chain. Before we begin, I'd like to thank EY, Flexingate, Magna, Nutrien, Prasad Employment Law, and RBC for sponsoring the CAMC Business Intelligence webinar series. These webinars are focused on supplier development, and by sponsoring, CAMC can provide education and skill-building assets to our network. First, we'll be hearing from Mike Pacholak, a Chief Purchasing Officer for City of Toronto's Purchasing and Materials Management Division, with experience as a municipal law solicitor, specializing in procurement law. Before handing the reins off to Mike, I would like to note that we have all attendees currently muted. However, if you have any questions during the webinar, please enter them in chat, where we'll select several to answer between panelists and at the end of the presentations. This webinar is also being recorded to be used as a resource made available afterwards. With all of the announcements out of the way, I'm happy to hand the webinar over to Mike. Mike?
All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me on this panel. Let's see if I have gotten control yet. Oh, doesn't seem to be doing anything.
There we go. Mike? It does look like you have control now, Mike.
It does. However, it doesn't seem to want to move.
You seem to be clicking through the entire presentation on my screen.
Oh, my apologies. See, the problem is on my screen, it's stuck. So it's stuck on the intro. Lovely technical problems with wireless internet connections.
Well, let's see what we can do to fix this. So I am going to move us back to the beginning here. Thank you, folks, for joining us in our Mysteries with Technology segment of today. Let's give this another go. So it looks like, Mike, it says that we're waiting for you to take control of the screen. If you'd like instead, we can just switch it over so that you are sharing the presentation from your screen, and we can go from there.
Okay.
Would that work for you?
I don't have the presentation on this computer, so, oh, share screen, I get it, sorry. Okay, perhaps maybe we just try one more time. See if this works.
Sure thing.
Okay. So this is not working. So Roy, what I would suggest, maybe you can just help me out. Maybe you can control the slides and I can just indicate where to go to the next slide.
Sure thing.
And I saw a note in the chat that we're having trouble hearing me. So hopefully it's not possibly my internet connection.
Here's hoping that it isn't. Let's see.
Okay. All right, so why don't we take me to what slide are you on there?
We are on the City of Toronto during COVID-19 slide.
Perfect. All right, so sorry about that. I'm actually working from home, surprised not because of COVID-19. I'm sure many people are doing this. So this is the joys of working at home with technology. So let me just tell you a little bit about the City of Toronto right now. Right now, we are not running all our services, as is probably pretty obvious to many folks in the City of Toronto. Our primary focus has been responding to COVID-19 via our healthcare and first responders, like public health, long-term home care, shelters, and paramedics, fire, and police. You can go to the next slide, please. So in doing that, I've honestly become a little bit of a different role than I previously had. So my title is Chief Purchasing Officer, but frankly, lately it's all been about personal protective equipment. So I spend my days talking about basically 6 or 7 things. N95, surgical masks, face shields, gowns, hand sanitizers, thermometers, and disinfectants. So that is the joys that I've been experienced for the last 8 weeks with a team of actually about a third of my overall purchasing staff. If you go to the next slide, please. Right now, we have been doing all our procurements for COVID in a bit of a different way than we would for our typical government procurement. We have been basically doing emergency non-competitive procedures, or in other words, we're directly ordering with vendors as we require. And we are working with a variety of vendors to do that. We have a number of vendors that we had existing contracts with. So to the extent that we have been able to, we've been amending those contracts. We have been looking for and finding new vendors in Canada who are in the importing business of PPE or have started to become involved in that business. We have found new vendors in Canada who are manufacturing, which is an awesome thing to do. And thanks to the provincial governments and the federal government for pushing for that. And we've also found some vendors outside of Canada who are manufacturing as well that we are looking at potentially doing business with. Ideally, though, we're trying to balance between the needs to have the PPE here for the first responders and also ensuring that our supply is a little bit more stable. So trying to leverage existing local suppliers to the best that we can in this environment. And all of these vendors are coming to us in one of 3 ways. One of them is our website. We've actually put up a specific website with respect to businesses who want to supply personal protective equipment. We also get a lot of direct referrals from staff and from the mayor's office and from councillor's office. And we've gotten updates from organizations like CAMC who have let us know which suppliers, that's a diverse supplier, who's gotten themselves into this business. Next slide, please.
There we go.
If you've gotten into this business or looking to get into this business, because it's not going to change for a while. It may slow down to some degree, but it's not going away. I think everyone's appreciation for personal protective equipment has definitely been enhanced. But when you're thinking about this or looking into doing this, you have to appreciate that personal protective equipment must meet requirements to be used. So the City of Toronto, we have been using the federal government's website to provide a really good guide on what the specifications are. In addition, anyone who wants to manufacture these types of items like face shields or surgical masks or import them into Canada, they're going to require a medical device establishment license from Health Canada. I'm not an expert on this. I've learned a little bit about this, but I do know that there's an expedited process that the federal government has put into place to help get this going faster. And then there's lots of other questions that we're kind of wondering how vendors are looking at things. Getting into the PPE business, is this a long-term move or is this a short-term move? Because I know a lot of companies, they've pivoted in response to COVID. They realized that maybe their normal line of business isn't really being used that given the current circumstances. And so they pivoted because they have good connections with manufacturers or other individuals who can help supply PPE. But in the long term, as we look at this over the next year or more, what's that gonna be for your type of business? Financing questions is also a really important thing to consider. We know that manufacturers really want upfront payments, and for a government, especially a municipality, that's a challenge for us. We've done our best to work out scenarios where we're avoiding advance payments, but we understand that vendors are put into a really hard position given the current circumstances of the supply chain. If you're looking at getting into this business, obviously logistics can be a challenge, and especially with respect to importing. China, I know, changed the rules quite frequently. You need to be quite on your toes to keep up with that. And then the best part about trying to get PPE is the fact that different organizations and different public sector organizations are going to look at requirements a bit differently. So we may, so hospitals, for example, may take a different approach than the city with respect to accepting surgical masks. Or long-term home cares outside the city of Toronto may take a different approach. And I know that can be a bit frustrating for vendors because if one organization takes it, it'd be fine for another, but everyone has a bit of a different unique challenges that they're trying to address. Go to the next slide. So right now, the city is sorting through a number of offers from different vendors. While we're placing direct orders, it's not as easy as you give us a call and we're all good to place an order right away. We ask a lot of information about the product that you're offering, the specifications, does our test results. We've kind of gotten to the business of translation because often test results are in a different language. So all we ask is that you have patience with us. Now that's a bit of a hard thing because I know vendors are often looking for quick responses because there's so much demand. So it's a bit of a challenge for the city to try to do some due diligence, but at the same time, knowing that that capacity for the medical masks may disappear really quickly because the demand is that high. So we've taken that risk on. We've lost a few deals here and there. We've been very successful otherwise with some of our vendors. We're actually now in the process, now that we're just over 60 days in from our perspective of being in an emergency operations center. We're actually looking to start to do competitive process for our longer term needs as most of our short-term needs for PPE have been met. So we're going to start changing up how we're approaching things in the next few weeks. And then just to let you know, again, as I said, for preference for things that for payment terms that are not advance payments is really critical for the city. We are having cash flow issues, as you may have heard in the news, and things like logistics. We are not designed well to handle all the logistics of getting shipments over from foreign countries to Canada. We often would prefer vendors who have that capability of assisting on that front. Go to the next slide. Now, while my life has been personal protective equipment for the last 8 weeks or so, we're actually doing business normally as well. While even though a number of services are suspended, we still have staff in the background working from home, trying to get movement on more day-to-day procurement. And as we talk more about reopening things and as we look over the next few months of how that might work, procurement, of course, will be required for these more day-to-day kind of situations. So that's where we are still more in the traditional government procurement approach. That would basically mean that procurements over 100,000 are posted to the open market through our e-procurement solution, SAP Ariba. And below 100,000, we do 3 quotes, and at least one of those quotes is from a certified diverse supplier, if possible. So work is continuing. And if you go to the last slide I have, this is the link for learning more about doing business that way with the city. There's an opportunity for you to do some mock procurement events in our SAP Ariba if you haven't used that system before. So it's something good to look into. And as we start to work out our transition from emergency response to going back to whatever the new normal is going to look like, I'm sure there's going to be an interesting review of all the actions we took and how we might want to think about changing how we approach procurements in the future. So while I don't think we'll be able to move to a position where we're as free as maybe a private sector company could be with respect to how they procure, I think there's definitely going to be an interesting question about how we look at local suppliers versus foreign manufacturing, and how that is going to all play out. So I don't have the answers yet. There's lots of rules, and we need to review some of them that are within the city's control and some that are not, that we're going to have to look at. But this event has really kind of demonstrated that Canada had a bit of a hole in it, that when it came to personal protective equipment, we didn't really have enough local manufacturing to just immediately fill that gap, and so it's being worked on, and that's fantastic. But what is that going to look like in the future? How are we going to change how we procure and how our manufacturing sector is set up such that we can weather a storm like this better in the future? So with that, I'll turn it back to Roy in case there's any questions.
All right, thank you very much, Mike. So to Anila, I do see that you asked the question, will we be able to get these slides? We are putting up the presentation as a video, as well as putting the links within the video description, so you will have access to that. But thank you very much, Mike, for your presentation thus far. We will be switching over to ISVAR momentarily. Before we do, if there are any questions to be asked. So I see that Kim has asked if the city would be looking for sanitizers and disinfectants during this time as well. We know that PPE is very important.
For sure, we are looking for that as well. So we'd love to learn more about what you may have to offer. Some of the sanitation disinfectants have been harder to get than others, so we are definitely looking for alternative approaches, especially as we consider reopening and potentially at some point in time bringing more staff back to an office in some sort of setting.
Okay, and in terms of services being offered as well, have you seen an uptake in services, especially right now, or is it business as usual in that case?
Well, with respect to some of the COVID stuff, there's certain services that kind of we've gotten more into. We've opened a number of shelters, so security has increased. Certain types of cleaning that we weren't doing before, like there's fogging of rooms, like we've gotten into that to some degree, and I think we'll be looking more at what else we can do to supplement some of our existing custodial services that we're doing, and what other types of services we might still require moving forward. I know there's going to be a lot of reviews about the entire approach, and we've made great strides, but we'll always do an analysis of how we can do better in the future.
Lovely. And one more question before we switch it over to Isfar, and that would be, what would be the best way to contact the city about a new PPE product or service? Would it be an application or an email or calling directly?
The best way is probably through one of the links is respect to telling us about your products. That's the best way. It's checked daily for new entrants, and we follow up from there.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Mike. We'll give you a break for now. And we'll be moving on to Isfar Prasad. Let me see if it will switch for me. So Isfar is the president of Carter Bennett Canada. And he actually did win the KMC's 2017 Small Business of the Year award. Isfar himself, let me see over here, has founded multiple businesses over the last 20 years in a wide range of fields, such as fashion, health, wellness, and real estate. Carter Bennett Group is a national janitorial company whose vision is to help create immaculate space for people to enjoy and employees to excel. And ready to present now will be Isfar Prasad. Isfar?
Thank you, Roy. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Awesome. Let me see if I've got the click. I requested, let me see. It's not clicking through. Let me try this again.
I believe that we might be experiencing a little bit of lag because I can see you clicking through on my screen.
Okay.
So I apologize for that. In which case, what I'll do is I'll control and you tell me when to switch.
Okay, so you can go back to the first page. First, I just want to say thank you for everybody being on this call. And I actually want to particularly thank everybody for their efforts, sacrifices, and their commitment in these new times. You know, we've all lost something serious as a loved one, job, income, comfort, and routine. So it really does take something to keep going forward and staying positive. So on behalf of me, I want to thank everybody. So yeah, my name is Isfar Prasad, and as you probably seen in some of my background, I've been a national buyer for the Bay. I've created a Made in Canada handbag company. I've also run a Hong Kong-based import company in fashion. And right now I run a commercial cleaning company, as Roy has said. All businesses somehow connected to where we are today. So supply chain, very exciting. I mean, if you had asked me 2 months ago to meet over coffee to talk about supply chain, I might have just slept in. It wasn't very exciting, but today it's on everybody's mind. Look no further than, you know, everybody's asking where the toilet paper is. So times have changed considerably. And I hope to make this presentation a little bit interesting so we can get some value from it. So everybody's read the headlines, right? Or some version of people struggling to find simple things as toilet paper or something as critical as an N95 mask. The headline from the Financial Post kind of sums up that sentiment, where someone's daughter-in-law was wearing a trash bag in a hospital. And we have a broken supply chain. And the question now is, what do we do? Can this spark fanatical change? One of my favorite quotes is, that which is not prohibited is compulsory. And how I look at that is, when you consider the status quo or things not changing, if we tolerate that, usually a catastrophe comes along. And today's supply chain really looks like a biological system, like the human body. It can be really resilient and it can heal itself, but at the same time, very vulnerable to something really small or a small weakness. And you can see that with the virus, something small, invisible, yet it's totally destructive. So our present supply chain makes everything look really simple. But I always say the road to simplification is complex. If you just look at cooking dinner, the analog for us making dinner is, in the olden days, we'd make a list with a pen and paper. It'd probably there's 6 parts in a pan. You get in your car, which has about 50,000 parts, sourced from all over the world. You go to the grocery store, there's 150,000 plus items in there. You choose 3, come back home, use one of your 13 appliances, make it, parts from all over the world also there, plates, knives, forks, plate mats. and then you finally eat, and at the end of the dinner, you might have interacted with over 250,000 variations or parts. Why that is worth saying is that if any part of that supply chain breaks, you're not going to get your chicken dinner. So if you go to the next slide, please. Good. So what are the results? What are you getting from the field? COVID-19 pandemic is forcing change. So right now, we are all participating in the most ambitious global social project ever, where some of us are asked to stay home so that others, essential service providers, healthcare workers, clerks, janitors, can go to work. And both sides are sacrificing immensely, whether it's income or personal safety. And without that compromise, this social agreement or compact, it would mean a total collapse of our society and how we live. So it really is an existential moment. We're reviewing everything. We're asking questions like, how can't we find this? Is this the best way to do that? We've been asking, is my work that important? So it means that the playing field has changed entirely. And Mike talked a lot about this, where the need for speed means that normal rules are being ripped up. One example was Spartan Bioscience, which got Health Canada approval for the COVID-19 test in April 13th, and they started shipping immediately. And incidentally, by May 5th, there was a lawsuit against Spartan Bioscience, which was since revoked. Also, regulators have been sidelined. Mike said this also. We've had examples of here in Montreal, a retired police officer on maternity leave making masks to supply hospitals because they didn't have any, bypassing all approvals. And power is being centralized. China is centralized, but sometimes here in Canada, and particularly the United States, it seems like we're fighting a civil war. You've got provinces bidding against provinces, states bidding against states. Since that time, Procurement Canada centralized the process, and even in the United States, New York, New Jersey, and a few other states have formed a partnership so that they don't compete and they purchase PPE together. We also see a lot of manufacturers pivoting. Furloughed, old, or mothballed businesses have been resurrected and retooled. You got car part makers making face shields. You got breweries making hand sanitizers. Stanfield's, a 160-year-old company, pivot from making underwear to making 100,000 gowns per week. So that means that all rules and conventions are being rewritten and broken. And all this seems new, but it's not. Can you click through again? Thank you. Okay. Yeah, so it's not new. We've been here before. One of the quotes I say is that when they came from my neighbor to the left, I did nothing. When they came from my neighbor to the right, I did nothing. And then they came from me and there was nothing left. Sometimes it seems that when something happens to someone else, we don't treat it as if it's our own problem. So we had this before. It was in 2011 in Japan, where the Fukushima nuclear plant, there was a 9-point magnitude earthquake, and that quake broke the entire supply chain. And at the time, Japan was the 3rd largest economy in the world, a supplier of parts of computers, electronics, automobiles, and the effects of it were felt as far away as Louisiana, where General Motors truck plant had to be shut down temporarily because they had no parts. So we did learn, we adjusted, we diversified our supply chain, but we actually thought that this quake would prompt companies to reevaluate their supply chain and shift from a focus of reducing inventory and cost, called a just-in-time model, to place more emphasis on buffering risk and building capacity in supply lines, a just-in-case mentality. But did we do that? No, and we didn't do it enough. We didn't build enough resilient capability. We didn't add inventories. We didn't add backup suppliers to reduce risk, because it had become really easy globally, notably from China, to source. And we jumped to the conclusion that the immediate benefits of low-cost wages would outweigh the long-term benefits of investing in relationship. Click through, Roy, please. So what's next? Click again. That is great. Yeah, you see the CTV News, May 2nd, suppliers facing the wild west of procurement, PPE procurement. So will this crisis lead to lasting change? Just for a little background, China has dominated the global supply chain for 40 plus years. It controls anywhere from 20 to 80% of the global supply chain, depending on items from finished goods to rare earth metals, electronic components, and even essentials like generic drugs. And not only does China dominate the supply chain, it controls major ports in Africa, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Greece, and even Belgium. So it controls the roadways. And why they have done that is because they are that good. They're amazing at it. But we have to consider that even if their supply chain might not recover from the systemic break. China's lost the confidence of some of their global buyers, and their economy has suffered also. Some 460,000 businesses went bankrupt in China in January and February. So procurement and supply chain strategy will need to be revisited. And why and how we're going to do that is because there's a concept in marketing that says that people will only change behavior to gain pleasure and avoid pain. Well, the pain of these emotions makes change really urgent. And we can see that even in how there's a national tribalism where nations are competing for limiting products on the open market. And it'll lead to a mentality of whoever has the biggest hammer will win. And nations feel vulnerable when exported countries withhold their essential products for use within their own markets. And this goes on to lead to a drive for self-sufficiency, a mad race for countries to bolster internal production and to control their own supply chain. And it's partly due to the insight we in North America have that we don't make anything anymore. Of the 10 most valuable companies in the world, Microsoft, Apple, Facebook, Berkshire Hathaway, only 2 actually make things. So nations are going to look at how can they exploit their own national self-interest. And throughout history, there have been examples of this sentiment that seems to work. My favorite is I'll take you back to 1600. It was Jean-Baptiste Colbert. He's a minister of finance under Louis XIV. And at the time, France's industries were facing immense pressure from Flemish glassware makers and English wool weavers. And Colbert created a made in France solution, putting laws together to regulate quality and attract talent. One of the laws had the intention of improving the quality of cloth. So if authorities found that a merchant's cloth was unsatisfactory on 3 separate occasions, they were to tie him to a post in the center square for public shaming and use the inferior cloth to attach him to it. So I'm not going to suggest that's going to inspire change, but we've seen that right now nations are moving towards that. In 2017, United States reduced their tax rate, the corporate tax rate, and they brought home a crazy $500 billion back into the country. Sadly, most of that was used for stock buybacks and dividend payouts rather than investing in supply chain, a lost opportunity. Recently, Japan, as part of their recovery budget, allocated $2 billion from that stimulus package to help, or I would say prod Japanese firms to move manufacturing supply chains out of China. So that means companies will be aggressively looking for the best talent and best solutions in their supply chain. And they will look for efficiencies through robotics, AI, and labor to secure their own production close at hand. So that means that cheapest price should not override common sense. Another case was the $2 billion case against Loblaws. I don't know if you guys remember, it was a building collapsing in Bangladesh in 2013. The case was dismissed. But Loblaws started to ask common sense questions like, if I pay 25 cents today for this t-shirt, and then I ask next year for it to be 10 cents, should I ask my suppliers, how can I make that possible? So a lot of questions are going to be asked. I also think that there might be a great buy Canadian sentiment, kind of a watershed moment where the Canadian consumer might favor made in Canada solutions. Will procurement departments demand larger percentages of homemade content? Will ethics and morality become an important line item? These are all questions that we're going to ask. Next slide, Nick. Roy, please. So what are the key takeaways? Where's the beef? Obviously another supply chain joke, but we'll go from there. So the darkest hour is just before the dawn. This will pass. It would really pass. So what we got to be prepared for as suppliers is we got to consider we got to be indispensable to the people we serve by understanding the challenges today and by listening to all our clients' needs. We got to be innovative. We got to be problem solvers, and that's going to be our new business. And we also have to be relevant. Some industries need to evolve in the short term. The recovery economy will need different products and different services. Mike's pointing to that right now too. And bigger is better. Size is important. Sometimes it's great. You have to form buying groups, form strategic partnerships to get bigger. join associations like CAMC, Chamber of Commerce. Look at government programs to assist Canadian manufacturers and service providers like IRAP, the EDC, Shred Credits. One of the things I've learned over the last couple of months is it's far more important right now to build relationships and not your bank account first. People are going to remember either those who helped them or those who took advantage of them. And it's a very emotional time, and it's going to be indelibly etched on the consumer and customer. So don't try to make all your money in one order. Everybody's got to be patient. There will be more for those suppliers with a long-term view of service. I like to tell people, don't get into virtue signaling, be virtuous. An example of this are companies who are supplying PPE like N95 masks, charging $20 a mask, where a mask would cost 72 cents, and they say they're trying to help. I would caution against that thing, because we're all going to be responsible for this recovery, and we want to be fair to everybody. I would also suggest everybody slow down, consult lawyers, insurance agents, accountants. Don't promise things you can't legally provide. You can see that Mike's presentation, he talked about going through the right channels to get approval for product. We've seen on the news where certain masks, 1 million of them were rejected because they didn't get their certification. For procurement and buying officers, I would say don't declare war on your suppliers. I think that sentiment is changing. There's a great concept called keiretsu. It's a Japanese concept. It's based on a close relationship between buyers and vendors, and its aim is to continuously learn, improve, and also prosper together. Here in North America, we generally set annual cost reduction targets. These Japanese businesses and Japanese clients are, although they're really demanding, they focus on improving supplier production by deeply understanding how suppliers work. They turn supplier rivalry into opportunity. They also invest heavily to improve the ability to develop product. I think you got to be partner. One of the great examples I saw was Spirit RX. It's actually a First Nations owned medical supply company that helped secure and deliver a load of PPE from China for the Manitoba healthcare workers just recently. I think we have to incentivize local production and supply to force commitment. The RFP processes should be built in with the redundancies to ensure a steady and dedicated flow of goods, and ask questions such that if my supply is interrupted for 30 days, could this cause a catastrophic break to my supply chain? And if the answer is yes, there should be a near-shore solution built into the procurement strategy as a percentage, and maybe account for that with higher price. I would ask all suppliers for their own supply chain continuity plan as above. One thing I believe in is you got to trust in Canada. Canadians are world-class merchants with really deep understanding of global supply chains who can lead the way. In fashion, we have lots of them. We have, Lawrence Stroll from Tommy Hilfiger. We've got the Rossi family, Dollarama, Shamandi family owned Gildan, the largest t-shirt manufacturer in the world. And we have so many more here. And I really believe Canadians can hold our own globally. And we just need to call upon all our talents for that. So in closing, in the midst of every crisis lies great opportunity. Albert Einstein supposedly said that. But this moment is a monumental shift in thinking. These are uncertain times, and out of the box and entrepreneurial thinking is a strength and actually a must. We got to keep our heads high. We got to treat everybody with dignity, and we got to plan for greatness, because we're going to get through this and all will be good, and we'll be stronger for it. So thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Ismar, for your presentation.
Thank you.
So we will be moving on to the question and answer period in just a moment. If you have any questions, please put them into the Q&A or into the chat, and we will be choosing from there in order to ask. One question that I see here for Isvar, let me actually pull it up, is that a question that we received is that my business has suffered immensely and I don't necessarily see a return to it. What can I do to look for or to get help in order to pivot? Yeah,
so I mean, I think you've got to consider whatever you did before. You want to not consider that. You want to consider what your strengths are, what your company's strengths are, and then look at within those strengths, what can you offer that's new? You almost have to come from nothing in the environment we're in, and you see it everywhere around us where, like I said, brewers are making sanitizers. You've got Melita, who used to make coffee filters, are now doing masks. It's not their specialty or their expertise, but they also know that they have inherent expertise in certain things. And I think it's a great time now to explore that for everybody, to see not going forward. It's not about where you came from, but where can you go and what can you do to make a difference and build a great business going forward.
All right, those are some very wise words. Another question that ended up popping up actually is, what sort of challenges has your businesses faced right now? I know that because you have experience in multiple fields, someone was wondering whether or not you were able to meet those challenges head on and turn them into opportunities.
Yeah, it's a good question. So we're in the janitorial space. So we've been impacted. I would say 50 to 60% of our customers are furloughed or paused. But out of that, we're being asked to provide other things. We've been asked to provide PPE. We've been asked to provide hand sanitizers. In fact, we're being asked right now to do fogging services. So our business is changing, because whatever we counted on prior to this, we can't count on going forward. We don't even know if some of the businesses will come out of this. So everybody's challenged. But again, it's an interesting time. You can really rewrite your businesses, and all entrepreneurs are adaptable, and you got to call on that right now.
Okay. Oh, so we do have a comment, and I'm going to read this out loud because it looks very positive. We need some positivity during sort of times. So just a comment that I too believe that this is an amazing opportunity for entrepreneurs and existing businesses to shine, here domestically and globally. The potential of our citizens is astounding, as proven by many Canadian companies over the past couple of months.
That's awesome.
And I think that's true. We've had so many companies either changing what they do or changing how they do it in order to help the Canadian workspace and help these essential workers get through the day. There's been so many companies. There's been one company in particular, I can't remember the name, but they're based in the distillery district, where they ended up changing what they do from brewing alcohol to creating hand sanitizer, and then putting the plans of how to do it for free use, so that more companies can join them in order to fight back against COVID-19, and that's fantastic. Yep. I've also seen personally, just from talking with our suppliers, just how many of them have switched over from doing either upholstery or manufacturing or a tier 1 work into creating something like PPE, like the face shields, plexiglass. It's amazing.
I see a picture.
Yes, that would be Belinda. No problem, Belinda. In any case, Mike, do you have anything to add regarding, let's say, the robustness of our suppliers?
Oh, I think if you can hear me, then I would agree that this is an amazing opportunity, and many suppliers have come forward and been able to shift over. We've been talking with a number of suppliers in different spaces: hand sanitizers, face shields, cloth masks, and then more are coming on with gowns. I know from large companies like Canada Goose to small companies, everyone is trying to do their best to shift over to what's going on, and it shows that the breadth of experience that people can bring to bear is quite astounding. So it's been really good to see. Now, for me though, part of the problem with everyone switching over is that their capacity is getting sucked up by bigger levels of government. So I'm it's all for the good, but at the same time, I want to get in there and get some of that product too. But it's really good to see that we're adapting this quickly. It's only been 2.5 months, really. 3 months.
Yeah, it's been a crazy 2.5 and 3 months, and I do understand that what the city of Toronto is competing with is essentially the federal government looking for the same sort of PPE and services that the city of Toronto is. It must be difficult.
Yeah, it's not easy, but really it's all like, at least we can say it's all for the benefit for everyone. Right? That's an interesting perspective, that we're not competing with everyone in a way that is detrimental. It's just trying to ensure that the products are getting to where they're most needed.
Right. So another question that I see here is actually for Mike. How will working remotely impact city services or procurement needs going forward? I'm supposing, like you, most of your colleagues are also working from home.
Yes, most of the city, wherever we could, have now been set up to work from home. We've actually we had to increase our network capacity. We started at 1,000 users that could be online into our system at one time. Now we're up at 10,000, thanks to our work of our technology services group and all their supply partners. We're trying to figure that out, what the next few weeks are going to look like. We're trying to determine which services that haven't been enabled get turned back on first, and then figure out from there, well, what will that look like? Will we be bringing people back in, like half of the office back in shifts? What kind of what kind of change cleaning processes are we going to need? What kind of processes are going to change? We're trying to push a lot to digital as best we can in short order, but we don't really have all the answers yet. We're like, in some parts, we're just kind of we've come out of the we were in the hurricane, and now we're just trying to figure out, okay, what does that look like moving forward? So lots to still do, and to figure out, and more information will come over the next few weeks and months.
Okay. So now we have a few questions for Isfar, if you're ready.
I'm ready. I'm excited.
Given the changes, do you see an increase in your staff levels to match the service? And also, do you see a shortage of PPE that you require for your team, seeing as PPE is being scattered throughout Canada and the requests are only growing? How are you going to be tackling both of these problems?
So I'll answer the last question first. So with PPE, we ordered all our N95 masks in middle of January when we saw the direction China was going, and we ordered our COVID-19 claim chemicals, which are not available anymore. We have ample supply, and it really, as a lesson of getting ahead of any demand in business. And what that required was financial commitment. We didn't know if it was going to come to Canada, but we're thankful that we have it, and we supply all our people with N95 masks, gowns, and the chemicals. So we planned ahead. Going forward, it is an extremely huge challenge getting it now. And we're looking at, if this continues, we'd have backup orders for that, but we don't know. N95 masks, again, are at a premium, but we'll see when that happens. Insofar as scaling up to with our people, our type of business is we scale really quickly. I would caution everybody also that yes, you have to make some financial commitments, in ahead of business needs, but also you have to be prudent and not overextend yourself. And what I believe is the economy is going to be very different. It's not going to go anywhere. There's still going to be people buying things, but they're going to be consuming different things. And you don't want to really put yourself at risk too much. Cautiously building your labor pools and building your inventory position is a good move right now as we try to figure out where this is all going to go. So I hope that answers the question.
I think it does rather well. Being able to scale up and scale down just as required is probably helpful during this time.
Yeah.
And speaking of being positive at this point, for a question for both Mike and Isfar, Would you be able to share one positive change that has happened as a result of COVID-19 that you can see continuing in the future?
I'll let Mike go first.
Sure, sure, thanks. You know, for the city, there's, well, I'm gonna say two. So one is we've actually gotten over what I would say is a bit of maybe risk aversion to working from home. So we didn't really, like, unlike many companies, we weren't usually using work from home prior to this. So we went from basically standing still to full run on it, and it's working. So that's a positive change that will impact our employees moving forward. I think the other thing is we were able to determine that we actually can adapt much better and much faster than we give ourselves credit for. And we got to make sure that we take our lessons learned from this situation and apply it in the new normal, and not lose sight of the fact that we as a government can be a little bit more nimble than we are typically known for. And now, whether we'll be super fast, you know, I don't know if we'll do that, but we can definitely move at a better pace than we have before. We often spend much time in committee talking about whether we should do something, and instead we've set up a really good decision-making framework that right people were involved, and we made decisions, and we took on the risks, and we learned from our mistakes as we went. And so we learned that we can adapt pretty good. So those are the two things I'd say that we'll take from this situation.
For me, I would continue with Mike just said, and one thing was really surprising for me and made me feel like, wow, it was the entrepreneurial spirit of our public sector, of our government, from the federal level all the way down. I mean, I've been called, I think, 4 times by the city of Toronto just to find out how my business is. Incredible, like consultants calling me, asking me, what can we do to help? That has never happened before. And that level of interest and adaptability I found at the government level the first time ever. Amazing. The second piece is personal to me, and for diverse businesses, where invisible people are finally being noticed. And when I talk about invisible people, I think about people who all work in the janitorial space, who now are on the front lines trying to get people safe. I talk about people who work in long-term care facilities who, for the most part, are people of color, who now are having a voice in saying, look, this is not working. I talk about people who are older, who've been put in positions where they're at risk, and now we're understanding that their life, even though they're older, is as important as anybody's life. So all these invisible people are finally having a voice. People are taking notice. And for me, I hope that continues. Because I always think that we all try our best to make this thing work. And it's great that you see people who are underrepresented all now have a voice, and they're visible to all of us. So those are my two.
You both have some very inspiring things to say, and it's good to hear the silver linings during this time.
It is.
So we do have time for about 2 more questions. The first of which will be, are either of you looking at keeping employees and teams engaged while working from home, and looking at the mental health of your employees and colleagues during this time? We're not necessarily getting that same social interaction as we were before, at least not the same quality. So that has become a worry for some of our suppliers.
Okay, I can go. I'll relieve you, Mike, of this one. I'll go first. I think for mental health, I can answer for that. You know, there are challenges being in the janitorial space, going into an environment where there could be a COVID-19. So that alone is stressful. So what we try to do is ensure that our priority are our people and their safety first. So we provide them with all their PPE. We talk to them. We give them clear rules of how to do this, and they have every right to say they don't want to do it. And some of them have said that because it is an extremely stressful time. People are worried that their wife or their husband is going to give it to their parents, and we're mindful of that. So we don't push anything, and we always prioritize their mental well-being and their comfort first. I think that's I could answer the mental question part of it for my perspective. So
And Mike, do you have it? Sorry.
No, it's okay. You know, from the city has been doing its best to try to ensure that we're engaging with all our staff. We've actually, you know, I think by necessity we have been trying to be more proactive than we probably have in the past. We've you know, for my team, like I actually have every other day kind of just 15-minute calls, mostly by video, depending on everyone's desired state of their hair. From a strategic communication perspective, there's daily messages. We have been engaging in everyday heroes. We try to showcase all the work that still goes on to promote how you know, the good work everyone's doing. And we're trying to remind people that there are supports in place if they are feeling the anxiety and pressure that comes from working in this environment. For some that have to, like our first responders or our long-term home care staff who are going into helping you know, very vulnerable populations, but in a very can be a dangerous situation, trying to ensure that we're reaching out to them, making sure that they're feeling connected. But then even with our office staff who may just be at home and kind of like in my instance, I'm in a very drab guest bedroom, you know, just trying to make sure we're engaged, having fun, remember to laugh, that we will get through this. We're trying to take that very seriously, and trying to ensure that everyone has the supports that they can have. And I'd have to say, I think we are engaging more now in this mode than we did in the office. I think I've heard more people say, I've heard more from our senior leaders now than we have before. So that's also a lesson learned for when we go to a new normal. We can't give up on what we've been doing. There's a need to keep connecting and keep engaging with staff. That is, you know, has to continue.
All right. So we're running down to the end of our webinar today. I do have one more question for you both, and that would be, do you have any suggestions or any inspiring words for businesses who are getting ready to reopen?
Okay, I guess. Yeah, Mike, you can go.
Okay, I don't know. I'm not sure. You know, I found Isfar was far more inspiring in his talk, but I think I would say, you know, patience and try to take a day at a time. There's because this isn't something where you're going to solve the problem instantaneously. You're going to have to learn. You got to be adaptable, and so you need to have a little bit of patience. The saying that we've been doing at the city when we started this was basically, we can't swallow the elephant. We have to take it one bite at a time. So take it day by day and try to be mindful of everything going on and adapting. Like that's there, because there's no surefire way to get through this, but we can do it together.
Yeah, that was pretty good. So I think that kind of sums it up. I think if I were to add anything, we're all in it together. We say that so many times, whether you're on the supply side or the buying side, doesn't matter. We've all got children at home, doing homework next door. We've got, everybody, no matter what your position in life, is all on the level playing field. And when we all return back, we're all returning back pretty much at the same level. Different things, but the same level. And I think the connection of being a human being was one of the things globally you saw. Everybody got rid of title, got rid of, all those things that get in the way, and we all just became just a human being dealing with a human being. And I think just trust in that. There are going to be bad days. There are going to be great days. But because of what we went through, like for the last 60 to 90 days, I think it does make people change. And we're going to be good. We'll get through this. It might take some time, but we'll be fine.
All right. Well, thank you both to Isfar and Mike for your presentations and your insights today. And I'd like to thank all of our attendees for joining us. Our next webinar will be on June 2nd, and it will be focused on the new virtual business card, resources and tools to aid organizations. As we settle into new routines and processes, CAMC will continue to ensure that we're providing you the most important information and development and support tools. One of the ways that we'll be doing this is with our procurement fair in July. For more information on that, you can find that on our events page on camc.ca, as well as through our e-blast that we send out weekly. Finally, I'd like to once again thank our webinar sponsors, EY, Flexingate, Magna, Nutrien, Prasad Employment Law, and as well as RBC for helping us be able to put on these webinars. With your support, CAMC will continue to bring supplier development through as many mediums as possible. Thank you very much for your time today, and I hope you have a lovely week.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Roy. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye for now.